The monitors flatlined into silence the moment Marcus laid his small hand on Mr. Whitmore's forehead. Just 9 years old, homeless, and clearly unwelcome in this elite hospital wing. He was seconds from being dragged out by The unthinkable happened. The billionaire's eyes fluttered open for the first time in 3 years. But before we dive into this astonishing journey, tell us, where are you watching from? Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you still believe in miracles. Let's unravel how a homeless boy and a comatose millionaire collided in the most extraordinary way. Marcus Robinson huddled beneath the highway overpass, rain hammering the concrete like drums. His worn backpack holding all he owned was clutched tight to his chest. At just 9, he had weathered more hardship than most ever would. His sharp mind and intelligent eyes didn't match the life he'd been handed. In Westbrook, Connecticut, a town of luxury cars and sculpted hedges, his existence felt like a ghost story no one believed. Just 6 months ago, Marcus had watched his mother Letitia draw her final, ragged breath in their tiny apartment. Years of untreated heart problems had finally taken her, after Westbrook General repeatedly downplayed her symptoms. When she spoke of chest pain, the doctor had muttered something about typical reactions in certain communities. Thinking Marcus wasn't listening, with no relatives on record and an overloaded foster system, Marcus slipped through society's cracks. He chose the streets over the horror stories he'd heard about group homes. Each day became a battle of survival, waking early to dodge patrol cars, washing in gas station sinks, spending long hours in the public library, where his brilliant mind flourished in silence. The librarians noticed his quiet hunger for knowledge, sometimes left a granola bar or juice box at his table without a word. Food came from the dumpsters behind upscale Westbrook restaurants where untouched gourmet meals were discarded for not being perfect enough. Marcus became a master of timing, knowing when Fresh Harvest tossed their artisan sandwiches, or when Bella Italia discarded their warm breadsticks. But sleep, that was the hardest. He rotated between abandoned sheds, shadowed park corners, and occasionally the cozy reading nook in the public library. One stormy Tuesday in October, trying to escape the cold and wet, Marcus stumbled upon an unlocked service door at Westbrook General, the hospital he had avoided since his mother died. The service halls were empty after dark, laundry rooms and supply storage, providing warmth and safety. Over time, Marcus grew braver, inching his way upward through the building during graveyard shifts. One night, he reached the top floor and stopped in awe. Behind a glass wall lay James Whitmore. The tech billionaire was motionless, surrounded by blinking machines. His suite looked more like a 5-star hotel than a hospital room. No visitors ever came. Nurses passing by whispered about the Whitmore case, the mogul who'd collapsed mid-speech at a charity gala 3 years earlier and had never awakened. Despite the finest care money could buy, he remained unresponsive. Marcus was fascinated. The stillness of this sleeping giant haunted him. Then came trouble. While near the elevators one night, Marcus was spotted by Officer Brennan, a security guard whose gaze turned cold the moment he saw the boy. "What are you doing here, kid?" Brennan barked, hand drifting toward his taser like Marcus was dangerous. "Looking for my mom," Marcus lied. "She cleans here." "Yeah, right," Brennan sneered. "I know all the cleaning staff and none of them got a kid like you. Now get out, before I call in a trespassing report." The guard's rough grip left bruises on Marcus's arm and deeper ones in his spirit. "These people are always starting trouble," Brennan muttered loud enough for Marcus to hear. He should have stayed away. But something about Whitmore's silence, his power, his helplessness called to Marcus in a way he couldn't explain. A week later, in the hospital lobby, Marcus found a discarded newspaper. Whitmore's story was on the front page. It spoke of how doctors remained puzzled. No brain trauma, no medical explanation for the ongoing coma. Yet his fortune kept growing, his empire functioning under interim control. That night, Marcus made a choice. He would return. He had to see Whitmore again. But something had changed. Security was tighter now. New keycard locks replaced open doors, and extra guards roamed the halls. For most kids, it would have been impossible, but Marcus had survived worse. He studied the staff's rhythms, who propped open doors for smoke breaks, which hallways emptied during shift changes. He slipped in through the service elevator during the 15-minute lull between the kitchen crew's exit and the cleaning team's arrival. On his third night back, Marcus ducked into a supply closet to avoid a nurse and came face to face with Walter Dott, an older black janitor. Walter had worked at Westbrook General for over 2 decades. His eyes widened, but instead of shouting, he asked gently, "You got somewhere safe to sleep tonight, son?" Marcus didn't answer. Walter sighed, reached into his lunch bag, and handed over half a sandwich. "My youngest was about your age when I started here. Just be careful. They've got cameras everywhere now." That simple act of kindness would become a turning point in Marcus's journey, and the key to unlocking a mystery no one else could solve. Sometimes Walter left a maintenance closet unlocked, or quietly shared details about the security patrol schedules. In return, Marcus helped however he could, reorganizing cluttered supply shelves, mopping floors in empty hallways, small gestures that eased the burden on Walter's aching knees. One quiet Sunday evening, while waiting for the right moment to sneak upstairs, Marcus wandered into the hospital waiting area and noticed a stack of newspapers. Flipping through them, a headline caught his eye: Whitmore Foundation funds Rural Healthcare Initiative. The photo beneath it showed a younger, vibrant James Whitmore cutting a ribbon at a clinic opening. His confident smile was a sharp contrast to the lifeless figure Marcus had watched through the glass every night. Other articles followed stories of Whitmore's philanthropy, scholarships for underserved students, technology hubs in low-income areas, grants for groundbreaking medical research. As Marcus absorbed each detail, a buried memory came flooding back, one he had nearly lost in the trauma of losing his mother and living on the streets. 2 years earlier, during a heavy downpour, Marcus and his mother had been walking home from the bus stop after her late diner shift. They were soaked, huddling under a flimsy umbrella, when a sleek black car pulled up beside them. The window rolled down, revealing a man's concerned face. "You shouldn't be out in this weather," he'd said kindly. "Can I give you a ride?" Letitia hesitated, cautious from experience, but the rain had worsened and Marcus was trembling. The man's eyes were warm, his tone reassuring. "I'm just heading home from a meeting. It's no trouble." During the brief ride, he introduced himself simply as James. He asked about their lives without judgment. When he learned Letitia walked 2 miles home after 12-hour shifts, he pressed several $100s into her hand, ignoring her protests. "For taxis on nights like this," he insisted. "No one should have to choose between getting home safe and paying bills." As Marcus stared at the newspaper photo, the realization hit. The man in the car that night, their quiet savior, had been James Whitmore. That discovery transformed Marcus' curiosity into something deeper, more urgent, more personal. Later that night, Marcus made it back to Whitmore's room and overheard a conversation that sent a chill down his spine. Dr. Eleanor Chin, a neurologist Marcus had seen often, was engaged in a tense exchange with a hospital administrator. "His EEG showed changes last week, more activity than we've seen in months," she argued, her voice measured but intense. "We can't ethically recommend termination at this point." The administrator dismissed her concerns. "The board's waited 3 years, Doctor. His son is pushing for closure. And frankly, we need that suite for patients with better prospects. Insurance has run out and even Whitmore's assets aren't bottomless. The ethics committee meets Thursday. Termination is likely by week's end." Dr. Chin left, frustrated, and unaware Marcus was crouched behind a linen cart. Later, a sharply dressed younger man visited briefly, his resemblance to Whitmore unmistakable. Unlike the doctor's warmth, this man barely looked up from his phone. "Just make him comfortable," he told the nurse flatly. "We all know this is just prolonging the inevitable." When everyone was gone, Marcus slipped inside. He approached Whitmore's bedside and whispered, "I remember you, sitting in the visitor's chair used for who knew how long," he continued. "You helped us that rainy night. Mom used that money for taxis, like you said. She also bought me new shoes for school." The machines beeped steadily as Marcus kept talking. He shared the books he was reading, details of his daily struggles, memories of his mother. Though the conversation was one-sided, it brought comfort and anchor to Whitmore and to his mother's memory. As dawn neared, Marcus whispered, "I'll come back tomorrow," not knowing the machines would be shut off in just 3 days. What would you do if you had only 3 days to save a life? How far would you go to help a stranger who once showed you kindness? For Marcus Robinson, those weren't abstract questions, they were urgent. Life or death realities. The revelation that Whitmore's life support would soon be withdrawn sparked panic in Marcus. He ducked into a supply closet, heart pounding, trying to catch his breath. The connection he felt to the sleeping billionaire couldn't be explained, but it was real, and it demanded action. The hospital was tightening security by the day, and Officer Brennan was relentless. Ever since ejecting Marcus the first time, he'd been on high alert. His descriptions of Marcus to staff dripped with racial bias, probably scoping for drugs or something to steal. Every nighttime visit became a high-stakes risk. By day, the library became Marcus' command center. On borrowed time and borrowed computers, his small fingers flew across the keyboard. He read everything he could about coma recovery, brainwave stimulation, case studies, miracle awakenings. Many accounts cited how familiar voices or touch had sparked responses in patients deemed unreachable. One afternoon, as he cut through a nearby park, on his way to an abandoned car he used for shelter, a group of teens from the wealthy neighborhood spotted him. "Hey, it's that homeless kid," one sneered, elbowing his friends. Their taunts quickly escalated, slurs mixed with shoves. "This park ain't for your kind," another spat, pushing Marcus to the ground. "Go back to whatever ghetto you came from." He walked away bloodied, lip split, pride bruised, but it only hardened his resolve. That night, he launched his boldest plan yet. Instead of leaving Whitmore's room before sunrise, Marcus crawled beneath the hospital bed and waited. When the midnight nurse came in, he held his breath, hidden in silence. After she left, he slid out and returned to his chair. "I know they don't think you can hear me," he whispered, "but I found stories that say otherwise." He pulled out a book, The Call of the Wild, and began to read aloud, page by page. He paused to explain tricky words, to share what he thought the story meant. Hours passed. Finally, as sleep overtook him, Marcus reached out, his small hand resting lightly on Whitmore's bed. Walter found him there during early morning rounds. Concern creased the janitor's brow as he gently shook Marcus awake. "This is getting too dangerous, son," Walter said. "Brennan's checking footage. He's convinced someone's been sneaking around." Walter didn't need to say what would happen if Marcus got caught. They both knew, so Walter handed Marcus a spare key card. "It's for the old maintenance closet near diagnostics. Nobody uses it much these days. It's safer than this room. I can't tell you to stop," Walter added, "but I can try to keep you safe." The final countdown had begun by day. Marcus continued his feverish research. By night, he kept his vigil. Dr. Chin noticed faint but encouraging changes in Whitmore's brain scans, but the board wasn't convinced. "These patterns don't match random neural activity," she argued in a meeting Marcus secretly listened in on. "Something is stimulating his mind, but I can't pinpoint the trigger," Dr. Chin admitted quietly. Meanwhile, across town, in a sleek, glass-walled office, overlooking the city skyline. Bradley Whitmore handled corporate affairs with chilling precision. He signed documents that rapidly restructured his father's companies, consolidating power in his own hands. My father always intended for me to take over, he reassured the board, addressing concerns about the abrupt timing. I'm simply accelerating transitions that will streamline operations when the inevitable happens. The casual way he spoke about his comatose father unsettled even the most seasoned executives in the room, though few dared express their unease out loud. By the night before life support was scheduled to be discontinued, Marcus had formed a desperate plan, part strategy, part prayer. He had overheard nurses discussing the exact time, 10 a.m. tomorrow. That gave him one final night, one last chance, evading security with the ease of practiced caution. Marcus slipped into the now familiar room just after midnight, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. If you were Marcus, would you have risked everything to repay a moment of kindness? Comment 1 if you believe in honoring goodness, no matter the cost, or 2 if you think protecting yourself must come first. Like and subscribe to witness what unfolds in Marcus's final, desperate attempt to save the man who once helped him and his mother. Will it work, or will hospital security finally catch him? Inside the private 12th floor suite, the beeping of monitors echoed like a countdown. Outside, October winds howled against the tall windows, mirroring the storm inside Marcus's chest. This night felt different, heavier, final. The hospital was quieter now. Skeleton staff roamed only the lower levels. Alone with the unconscious man, Marcus pulled his battered backpack into his lap and slowly unzipped it. From within, he retrieved his most cherished item, a small, framed photograph. "This is my mom," he said softly, showing the photo to James Whitmore. "Her name was Letitia. You met her that night when you gave us a ride." The picture showed a smiling black woman with Marcus' same soulful eyes and strong jaw, her arm wrapped lovingly around a younger Marcus. "She died," he continued, voice cracking, "because nobody here believed her heart was failing. 3 doctors. 3. They said she was overreacting or drug-seeking." Tears streamed down his cheeks now. "They said, black women exaggerate pain. That's what a nurse actually wrote in her chart. I saw it. They just gave her pills and sent her home again and again, even when she couldn't breathe." The monitors beside Whitmore beeped steadily, unchanged, indifferent to the truth pouring from Marcus' heart. "After you dropped us off that night, she told me there were still good people in the world. She used some of that money you gave her for taxis, just like you told her. But she also bought me new school shoes. Mine had holes. The kids laughed at me." Marcus leaned closer to the bed. "Yesterday, I found out your foundation rejected a clinic grant. 3 years ago. It was supposed to open in our neighborhood, Eastern Heights. It might have helped Mom at first." Learning this had made Marcus furious, betrayed. He had read a report listing rejected proposals by the Whitmore Foundation. The Eastern Heights Community Health Initiative was among them. The reason? The board had decided the county hospital 15 miles away was sufficient coverage. "But most people in our neighborhood don't have cars," Marcus whispered bitterly. "The bus takes 2 hours each way." The irony hit hard. The man he had come to admire, the man who once helped them, had unknowingly contributed to the very system that had let his mother die. Still, something had kept Marcus returning to that hospital room night after night. "I'm not mad at you anymore," he said at last. "I don't think you even knew. The article said your foundation rejected the grant after you were already in the coma." His voice grew softer as the night deepened. He shared everything. The struggle to stay warm, the hunger, the fear, the books that made him dream. He spoke of the schools he passed each morning but could never attend. He talked about the difference between how he was treated and how white kids in Westbrook were treated just for existing. "The librarians are the only people who talk to me like I matter," he added. "They leave snacks when they think I'm not looking. But most folks just see me and think trouble. But I still can't identify the cause. Dr. Chin murmured, her voice tight with frustration. Across town, inside a sleek office tower encased in glass, Bradley Whitmore moved through meetings with practiced detachment. He signed off on documents that rapidly consolidated control of his father's companies under his own name. My father always intended for me to take over, he told the board, addressing their concerns with cool assurance. I'm merely accelerating transitions. He planned streamlining the future. The icy ease with which he discussed his father's impending death unsettled even the most hardened executives. Still, no one openly challenged him. Back at the hospital, as the final night before the scheduled termination of life support began, Marcus moved with urgency. Having overheard staff mention the exact time, 10 a.m., he knew this was his last chance. With practiced stealth, Marcus slipped into the private suite just past midnight, his chest tight with anxiety and hope. If you were in Marcus' shoes, would you risk everything to repay a kindness once shown to you? Comment 1, if you believe in returning compassion at all costs. Soar 2, if you think he should have protected himself instead. Like and subscribe to see what happens during Marcus' last desperate attempt to save the man who once saved him. In the 12th floor suite, medical monitors beeped softly in the stillness. Wind howled beyond the windows, echoing the storm inside. Marcus' heart? This night carried a weight the others hadn't: finality, fear, and a flicker of desperate belief. The hospital had fallen quiet. Most of the night staff remained floors below, focused on active patients. Marcus pulled his threadbare backpack onto his lap and retrieved the only item he had kept through all his nights on the street, a small framed photo. "This is my mom," he whispered, turning the photo toward Whitmore's still face. "Her name was Letitia. You gave us a ride one night, in the rain." The image showed a smiling black woman, with Marcus' same expressive eyes, her arm wrapped lovingly around a younger version of him. She died because no one here believed she was sick. 3 different doctors told her she was overreacting, or just looking for pain meds. Marcus's voice cracked. They said, "Black women exaggerate pain. That's what the nurse wrote in her chart. I saw it, when they left it on the counter." The monitors continued their steady rhythm, unaffected by the boy's grief. "After you drove us home that night, she told me there were still good people in the world. She used your money for cab rides like you said, but also bought me new shoes. My old ones had holes. Kids made fun of me at school." He shifted closer to the bed. "Yesterday, I found out your foundation turned down a grant for a clinic in our neighborhood 3 years ago. That clinic might have helped my mom." At first, the discovery had stung an emotional gut punch that threatened to break the fragile bond Marcus had formed with Whitmore. He had read about the Eastern Heights Community Health Initiative, how the board declined the grant, saying the county hospital 15 miles away was sufficient. "But most of us don't have cars," Marcus said, "and the bus takes 2 hours. The irony had nearly shattered his faith. The man he had admired might have played a role, however unknowingly, in a system that failed his mother. "But I'm not mad anymore," he said softly. "The article said the rejection came after you were already in the coma. I don't think you even knew." As the night wore on, Marcus opened up. He spoke about his daily fight to survive, his longing to go to school, the quiet prejudice he felt in Westbrook. He talked about the librarians who treated him kindly, and the woman yesterday who asked staff to make him leave just for sitting and reading. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," he murmured, his voice fading with exhaustion. He read from a worn poetry book he'd borrowed from the library, the verses soft and steady in the dim room. Eventually, fatigue overtook him. He curled into the oversized visitor's chair, tear tracks drying on his cheeks, one hand resting gently on the edge of Whitmore's bed as he drifted into sleep mid-sentence. Elsewhere in the hospital, Dr. Eleanor Chin hunched over screens and her office brow furrowed. She reviewed the latest neural scans, confused, yet captivated. The readings showed clear signs. Spikes in brain activity during certain nighttime hours. They didn't align with medication schedules or natural sleep cycles. Something's triggering this, she muttered, rubbing tired eyes behind her glasses. The hospital board had shrugged off these findings, calling them statistical anomalies. The withdrawal order remained on schedule. The paperwork had already been filed. Downstairs, Officer Brennan began his midnight rounds, fixated on the executive wing. His suspicion about unauthorized intrusions had intensified. "I'm telling you, someone's sneaking in there," he'd warned his supervisor earlier. "Probably that same black kid I caught snooping around. You know how they are always up to something." Though his supervisor dismissed the racist undertones, he authorized more patrols just to be safe. Brennan took the directive with unsettling eagerness, as Brennan radioed his plan to sweep the 12th floor. Walter overheard the transmission while mopping nearby. His heart sank. Abandoning his cart, the aging janitor rushed toward the service elevator, hoping to reach Marcus first. His joints ached with each hurried step. The elevator seemed agonizingly slow. Upstairs, Marcus stirred at the sound of approaching footsteps, keys jingling just beyond the hallway. Panic surged. The bathroom door stood ajar, but getting there meant crossing open ground in full view. The footsteps drew nearer. Acting on instinct, Marcus stood and moved back to the bed. "I have to go," he whispered urgently. "They're going to shut everything off today." Tears filled his eyes. "Please wake up," he begged, voice cracking. "I need you to wake up. I don't have anyone else left." With trembling fingers, he reached out and pressed his hand gently to Whitmore's forehead. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being kind to us that night. I wish you could be okay." What happened next defied logic and medical explanation. Beneath Marcus's touch, James Whitmore's eyelids fluttered. The monitors spiked with activity. Alarms triggered. Vital signs surged. Outside the door, Brennan's hand reached for the handle just as Whitmore's eyes opened wide. His gaze darted around in confusion, then locked onto the small boy standing beside him. His lips moved. No sound came, but the recognition was unmistakable. The door burst open as alarms echoed through the suite. Brennan, nurses, and a wave of staff rushed inside, stunned by what they saw. In the chaos, Marcus ducked into the bathroom, heart pounding as he listened to the whirlwind of shocked voices. "He's responsive. Get Dr. Chin immediately. BP. Rising heart rate stabilizing. Mr. Whitmore, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand." Through a narrow crack, Marcus watched the miracle unfold. The sleeping giant had finally awakened by midday. Westbrook buzzed with the news. Reporters swarmed the hospital parking lot. Satellite vans formed a temporary village. Headlines dominated the airwaves. Tech billionaire awakens after 3-year coma. Medical experts debated theories around the clock, but none could explain what had happened. Marcus kept to the shadows, hiding in plain sight amid the chaos. The media frenzy allowed him to blend in without raising questions. His emotions were a storm: relief that Whitmore was alive, wonder at having witnessed something extraordinary, and fear of being caught. Walter found him hiding hours later and handed over a sandwich. "They're calling it a spontaneous neurological recovery," the janitor whispered. "But no one knows why it happened. Cameras in his room malfunctioned last night. Some kind of glitch." He gave Marcus a knowing look. "Lucky for you. You were there when it happened, weren't you?" Marcus said nothing. He didn't need to. Walter squeezed his shoulder gently. "Sometimes miracles need a little help, but you'd best lay low. Brennan's on a warpath." Meanwhile, James Whitmore faced his own disorientation. His mind was foggy, his voice a dry rasp. His muscles had atrophied from years of stillness, despite the therapy done in Coma. "You've experienced a cryptogenic stroke," Dr. Chin explained during a quiet exam, her tone soothing. "That means a stroke without a clear cause. You collapsed mid-speech at a charity gala." His memories were fragmented, pieces of his former life missing, but the man he had once been was beginning to reawaken, with Walter's quiet support. James began piecing together both his fragmented personal memories and the unsettling shifts in his business empire during his absence. Among the mental fog, one memory grew sharper. A rainy evening, a woman and her child. "I remember pulling over to offer them a ride," he told Dr. Chin. The mother was cautious, understandably protective, but the boy, his eyes were remarkable. So alert, so intelligent. He'd given them money for transport, seeing them walking in unsafe conditions after dark. The growing clarity of this memory and its overlap with the mysterious hospital visitor fueled James's deepening need to find the child. Even as Bradley continued steering conversations toward company affairs. Outside, the bitter cold worsened. Westbrook entered a third night of record-breaking lows. The shelter at First Presbyterian reached full capacity before nightfall, turning away those in need with quiet apologies and mention of fire code limitations. The public library stayed open late as an informal warming space, but it too closed by 9, leaving the town's unhoused residents to face another deadly night. Marcus, having used his last few dollars on a cheap meal that offered brief warmth, wandered the empty streets in search of shelter. His usual hideouts in commercial zones had been sealed off after news reports prompted business owners to secure their properties. Every step grew heavier as Marcus trudged across frozen sidewalks, the wind slicing through his thin jacket. His thinking slowed, a sign he recognized from survival books. Hypothermia. "Keep moving," he mumbled to himself, forcing his frozen limbs to obey. Find warmth. Though the hospital's warmth called to him, he resisted. Security would be on alert. Getting caught meant foster placement far from Westbrook, from Walter's quiet protection, and from the man in the coma, who, somehow, knew him instead. Marcus curled into an alleyway wedged between a restaurant and an office complex, drawn by kitchen exhaust that radiated faint heat. He tucked himself tightly against the bricks, wrapping cardboard over his shivering body. Sleep came quickly, overtaking him in the final moments of coherence. His last thought, James Whitmore's eyes locking with his, in the hospital room. Recognition, then confusion, as he fled. At dawn, the restaurant staff found him unresponsive, barely visible beneath frost-coated cardboard, when they arrived to prep breakfast. The ambulance was on scene within minutes. Paramedics worked swiftly, stabilizing his dangerously low core temperature as they rushed him to Westbrook General Hospital. Severe hypothermia, probable frostbite, pediatric male, no ID, roughly 8 to 10 years old, the lead paramedic radioed. Ahead. "If you were the one making that call, would you treat this child immediately, regardless of background?" Would the hospital staff recognize the boy from the surveillance footage? And what would James do when he learned the full truth about the child who pulled him back from a 3-year void? The emergency wing of Westbrook General buzzed with urgency as paramedics wheeled Marcus through the automatic doors, his small body nearly lost beneath heated blankets and wires. Core temp is 89.6. Rising slowly, the lead paramedic updated the medical team. Found unconscious in an alley off Main. No ID, no guardian. Dr. Tanya Wilson, the attending physician, quickly took control. "Start the warming protocol. Get labs a chest film, and call PES now." Her firm orders clashed with the slower response from the admissions clerk, who asked, "Any indication of insurance or financial responsibility?" Dr. Wilson snapped, "He's a critical pediatric case. Treat first, worry about billing later." Still, the undercurrent of bias lingered. As Marcus was transferred to a bay, murmured speculation rippled through the staff, whispers about drugs, neglect, or criminal ties. Security hovered too close, and the assigned social worker began preemptively discussing group home placements, not personal circumstances. Another East Side case. One nurse commented near Dr. Wilson, "Parents, probably using while the kid froze." Another added. Dr. Wilson cut in, sharp and cold. "That's conjecture. Practice medicine, not prejudice." Her words silenced the gossip for the moment. Blood work results brought fresh concern. Pneumonia in both lungs. Rising temp could cause seizures, Dr. Wilson warned. "Transfer to PES ICU." As they prepared for the move, a respiratory therapist named Jasmine did a double take. "Wait, I know this kid. He's always at the public library. Librarians said he might be homeless since his mom died." This one sentence changed everything. Suddenly, Marcus was no longer just a faceless patient. He was someone with a story, someone who mattered. Bradley Whitmore appeared at the hospital, within hours of his father's return to consciousness. Perfectly tailored in a designer suit and framed by the press outside the hospital entrance. "Our family is overcome with gratitude," he told reporters, his voice breaking with practiced emotion. "After 3 long years of hoping and praying, my father has come back to us." Behind closed doors, however, Bradley's demeanor subtly shifted. His smiles faded quickly, his attention frequently diverted by his phone's constant vibrations, and his conversation steered more toward corporate updates than concern for James's health. "The board is eager to hear your thoughts on the restructuring," he mentioned casually on the second day, sliding documents onto the bedside table. "Nothing urgent, just some strategic updates we made while you were away." Still regaining control over his body, James couldn't articulate the unease building inside him, but his decades in business helped him detect the careful deflections in Bradley's tone. Something between them had shifted, something deeper than the natural toll of time and trauma. When he brought up the Whitmore Foundation, Bradley grew noticeably uneasy, dodging specific questions about programs or grant distributions. "We've upheld your core vision," he offered vaguely. "Just adjusted for today's needs." Dr. Chin had cautioned James to ease back into business matters gradually to prevent regression, but his instincts couldn't ignore the inconsistencies. While he focused on regaining strength, Dr. Chin quietly launched her own inquiry into the mysteries surrounding his awakening. Surveillance logs revealed fleeting glimpses of a small figure roaming the hospital corridors late at night. More intriguingly, neural scans from the weeks before James woke up showed regular spikes in brain activity, always during overnight hours, and always without medical intervention. Someone had been visiting him during a private meeting with Dr. Patel. She shared her growing suspicion. James's brain had been reacting to external stimuli, possibly touch or voice. When hospital security got wind of her theory, they immediately initiated an investigation, tasking Officer Brennan with tracking the unknown intruder. "Probably just a junkie or some gang kid looking for drugs," Brennan scoffed in a staff briefing, his words steeped in racial bias. "Young black male, small frame. Could be early teens, maybe younger. Dangerous. Probably affiliated." Dr. Chin's stomach turned at the implications. The surveillance images, grainy though they were, clearly showed nothing more threatening than a child in oversized clothes. Walter, a member of the maintenance staff, stood quietly at the back of the room, his lined face giving away nothing. Later that day, he approached Dr. Chin near the pharmacy, maneuvering his cleaning cart for a discreet conversation. "About that visitor," he said carefully, "I might know something." Dr. Chin glanced around, then nodded. "I'm listening." In deliberately vague but earnest terms, Walter shared what he knew. He spoke of a homeless boy who had lost his mother, a boy who had found his way to James's hospital room, who read to him, spoke to him, and somehow connected with him in ways no one could explain. "He's a good kid," Walter said softly, "sharp as they come. Been living on the street since his mama passed, but still gets books from the library, always learning." Dr. Chin listened intently, her thoughts racing. And he was there, the night Mr. Whitmore woke up. Walter nodded. Left right after it happened. Been hiding out around the hospital ever since. Has nowhere else to go, especially now, with this cold snap. 12 floors above, in his hospital bed, James Whitmore was struck by a sudden flash of clarity. A child's voice, faint but distinct, echoed in his mind, "I need you." The words rang with such vividness that he immediately summoned the nurse, urgent to share the moment with Dr. Chin. Something extraordinary had occurred during his coma, something human, real, and he was determined to understand what, or who, had pulled him back from the brink. Have you ever felt such an unshakable bond with someone, one that defied reason? What would you do if the person who saved your life vanished before you could thank them? For James, these questions became a burning obsession as he fought to reclaim his strength. Mornings were consumed by grueling physical therapy sessions that pushed his weakened muscles past their limits. Afternoons brought speech exercises, memory drills, and consultations with experts who marveled at his inexplicable recovery. But even amidst this demanding regimen, James reserved every free moment for what staff had begun calling his mystery project, identifying the boy from the footage. He was real, James insisted to Dr. Chin, his voice growing steadier by the day. I remember someone reading to me, just talking, like I mattered, though hospital policy prevented her from revealing Marcus's identity. Dr. Chin confirmed the neurological data and the security clips that aligned with James's recollection. The brain can respond to environmental input even in coma states, she explained. We still don't fully understand how. But James wasn't satisfied with clinical theory. This wasn't ambient noise or passing voices, he argued. This was someone with me. When no one else stayed longer than 10 minutes, he stayed. I need to find him. Walter, overhearing part of the conversation, later joined discreetly, again offering limited but purposeful details. Might have been a boy staying nearby. No one harmful, just cold. Probably scared, looking for shelter. James's concern deepened. A child shouldn't be alone out there. Not now. Not with the weather turning. Indeed, outside the hospital, the first brutal cold snap of the season had hit Westbrook. Meteorologists warned of record-breaking lows and potential fatalities among unhoused populations. Emergency shelters hastily opened, but space was limited. For Marcus, the cold was merciless. His usual hideouts offered no warmth, and the abandoned car that once served as refuge had become a freezing metal shell. The library now closed early, and food was harder to find. Walter had offered him a place to stay, but Marcus declined, not wanting to put the kind janitor's job at risk. As he huddled under layers of newspaper in a back alley, his thoughts circled back to James Whitmore. Had he really remembered Marcus in that moment? Did he recall the rainy night, years ago, when a stranger's kindness had changed everything, unbeknownst? To him, James was wondering the same. In his hospital room, he had begun combing through company reports and foundation records, disturbed by what he saw. His tech firm had abandoned its social mission in favor of defense contracts. The affordable housing initiative was dead, replaced by luxury ventures. Most troubling of all were the foundation's rejection letters, countless applications from minorities-serving organizations, dismissed with cold, bureaucratic language. These didn't meet our updated metrics for measurable outcomes, Bradley explained, his tone flippant. James frowned. Let me see the board meeting minutes from the last year, he said calmly, noting the stiffness in his son's posture. And the Eastern Heights Health Initiative, why was that denied? Bradley flinched. That neighborhood already has clinics. The proposal wasn't well constructed. It was a unanimous decision. His defensive tone only fueled James's suspicion. With Dr. Chin's quiet support, he resolved to uncover exactly how far things had drifted during his absence, to find the boy who, somehow, had brought him back, as James Whitmore continued his recovery on the 12th floor. His progress astonished the rehabilitation staff. He had advanced to walking short stretches with the aid of a walker, sheer willpower driving a pace that outpaced clinical expectations. During one particularly intense session, he overheard a conversation among nearby nurses about a pediatric emergency case, a homeless boy found nearly frozen overnight. Something in their description stopped Whitmore mid-stride. "That child?" he asked, interrupting them. "Do you know his name, or how old he is?" They didn't. Their lack of specifics only heightened his interest. "Please, find out what you can. It matters." Normally, such a request might have been brushed aside, but coming from James Whitmore, whose awakening had already been called, Miraculite traveled quickly through hospital channels, eventually reaching Dr. Chin during her morning rounds. The moment she heard, she connected the details to the unknown child Walter had described weeks ago. But instead of immediately informing James, she headed straight to the pediatric ICU. There, Marcus lay unconscious, monitors tracking his fragile vitals, an oxygen mask pressed to his face, IV lines feeding antibiotics into his weakened system. Dr. Chin arrived just as the boy's fever began to spike. "We're doing what we can," a pediatric specialist told her, watching Marcus's body tremble despite warming blankets. But between pneumonia, chronic malnutrition, and cold exposure, his system's crashing. "We're trying to keep the fever from triggering a seizure." Dr. Chin took in the scene carefully. The boy's features matched the figure in the security footage, and more importantly, the timing of his hospital admission aligned eerily with Whitmore's increased urgency to find his mysterious visitor. "I believe I know someone who might recognize this child," she said cautiously to the team, "a patient who believes they share a connection." The pediatrician frowned. "Unless this individual is a legal guardian, social services, James Whitmore." Dr. Chin interrupted, her tone clipped. That name stopped the conversation cold. With an hour's end, against the strong recommendation of his rehab, Team Whitmore insisted on visiting the boy. He arrived by wheelchair oxygen tank, trailing behind him. The moment he saw Marcus's, recognition washed over his face. "It's him," he said softly, emotion thick in his voice. "The boy from that rainy night, and from my hospital room." Despite his own weakness, Whitmore reached out and touched Marcus's arm gently. "What happened to him?" Dr. Chin filled in what little they knew. Severe hypothermia, pneumonia, and no known family. As James processed this, Marcus's fevered eyes blinked open for a fleeting second. They focused on Whitmore, flickering with recognition, before sliding closed again. "He had a mother," James murmured, startled by another memory surfacing. "She was with him when I met them." "What happened to her?" Walter, who had entered quietly during the exchange, answered. "She died 6 months back. Heart condition. She went untreated too long. Nobody paid attention until it was too late." He lowered his voice. "The boy's been alone ever since. Library, rooftops, wherever he could hide from the cold." James's hands gripped the arms of his wheelchair. His monitor beeped rapidly, heart rate and blood pressure rising as the full weight of the boy's reality hit him. "He's been surviving on the streets. While I was in a coma suite with private care and constant monitoring." The injustice of it hit him hard, an unbearable contrast between his privilege and the child's abandonment. "I want him moved," Whitmore said suddenly, voice commanding. "Into the pediatric unit near my suite. Give him the best care we've got. Specialists, private nurses, anything he needs." Hospital administrators might have objected under different circumstances, but no one dared argue with Whitmore, not after what he'd survived, and certainly not with the resources he commanded. Within hours, Marcus was relocated to a top-floor room near Whitmore's. A new care team assembled experts in pediatric respiratory illness and malnutrition, despite his own fragile recovery. Whitmore began spending long hours at Marcus's side, reading to him from books Walter brought up from the library, flipping the roles they had once shared, though James hadn't known it then. This unique arrangement quickly stirred hospital curiosity and eventually reached Bradley Whitmore. He arrived unannounced during one of his father's quiet, bedside vigils. His reaction was immediate and unfiltered. "So this is why you've been dodging meetings," he said sharply. "Babysitting some random street kid." The acidic tone, honed in boardrooms, filled the room with tension. James looked up from the book in his hands, his eyes steely. "He's not a random street kid," he replied coldly. "His name is Marcus, and he's the reason I woke up." Bradley scoffed. "You can't actually believe that. The doctors said your recovery was spontaneous, statistically inevitable." His gaze shifted toward Marcus with a sneer. "Look, I get it, sure, feeling generous. But we have a foundation for charity work. You don't need to adopt every stray that stumbles in." The racial undertone in Bradley's words didn't go unnoticed. It struck a nerve, so deep in Whitmore that even he seemed startled by the force of the anger rising in him. "That's enough," Whitmore said, his voice low, but filled with authority. "This child came to see me every night when you couldn't. Spare 15 minutes twice a month. He read to me, spoke to me, treated me like a human being, not a coma patient or an asset on a balance sheet." The confrontation escalated. Bradley shifted tactics, adopting a more calculated tone. His voice softened with feigned concern. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly," he said gently. "The doctors warned us about post-coma cognitive effects. Your decision-making might be impaired." He placed a hand on his father's shoulder, lowering his voice to a confidential murmur. "We should prioritize your recovery and the business. I've arranged for a neuropsychiatric evaluation too. Assess your mental fitness." The threat behind the concern was unmistakable, a potential challenge to Whitmore's legal authority over his companies. Before Whitmore could respond, a hospital administrator entered the room, her expression tight. "Mr. Whitmore, we need to discuss the boy. Because he has no insurance and no legal guardian, our policy requires transferring him to County General once his condition stabilizes. Their social services department handles placement for abandoned minors." Bradley jumped at the opportunity. "Excellent," he said smoothly. "They're equipped for this sort of thing. We'll arrange transport once he's stable." Whitmore's reply was immediate and ironclad. "Marcus stays here under my care and at my expense. Have my legal team draft the necessary emergency guardianship forms." The administrator hesitated. "Sir, child placement involves a legal process court review, home inspections, background checks." "I'm aware," Whitmore cut in sharply. "Do you know how his mother died? She came to this hospital 7 times. Each time, her symptoms were dismissed because of the color of her skin, not the content of her chart. Now you want to ship her son off to a crowded public facility because he doesn't have Blue Cross." His voice rose enough to rouse Marcus, who stirred beneath the blankets, his fevered eyes opening to the charged scene. Seeing the boy's distress, Whitmore recalibrated, shifting to the calm, deliberate tone that once sealed billion-dollar deals. "I understand protocol. Begin it with my attorneys facilitating. In the meantime, I'm assuming full financial responsibility. He stays here, where I can ensure he receives proper care." Bradley's expression darkened. His polished composure began to fracture. "This is exactly why we need that competency evaluation," he snapped. "You've known this kid 5 minutes, and you're talking about guardianship. What's next? Adoption? Making a street kid from Eastern Heights a Whitmore?" The barely veiled prejudice in his voice hung thick in the air. At that moment, Marcus fully regained consciousness. His bright, fevered eyes flicked between the two men, trying to understand. His heart monitor spiked, triggering alarms. Medical personnel rushed in, crowding the room. Bradley stepped back, throwing one last remark over his shoulder as he exited. This conversation isn't over. I'm calling an emergency board meeting as the medical team stabilized Marcus. James and Bradley locked eyes through the glass, father and son, now divided by more than circumstance. What once had been a shared empire was quickly becoming a battlefield of values. Inherited privilege versus a conscience reborn. 3 days later, Westbrook General's largest conference room hosted a meeting unlike any in its history. Normally reserved for clinical symposia and board reviews, it now held hospital leadership, legal advisors, and a resolute James Whitmore, still requiring oxygen and rest intervals, but stronger by the day. I've called this meeting to address 3 interconnected issues, Whitmore began, his voice more powerful than anyone expected. First, the care of Marcus Robinson. Second, systemic disparities in this hospital's treatment practices. Third, the mismanagement of the Whitmore Foundation during my incapacitation. Dr. Harrison, the hospital's chief administrator, shifted awkwardly. Mr. Whitmore, while we appreciate your concern, hospital policy concerning uninsured minors is clear. Whitmore raised his hand, silencing him. I've reviewed your policy with counsel. Nowhere does it require sending a critically ill child to an overcrowded public facility simply because of insurance status. That's a financial decision, not a medical one. He scanned the room, daring contradiction. And, he continued, I've reviewed Letitia Robinson's medical file. Tension rippled through the group as her records appeared on the screen. Key phrases highlighted in bold red. 7 ER visits in 18 months. Cardiac symptoms documented every time. Diagnosis, anxiety, indigestion, stress. By her 3rd visit, her chart was flagged for suspected drug seeking without evidence. At Whitmore's request, Dr. Chin rose from the corner. This pattern, she said, is sadly familiar. The dismissal of pain in black women is well documented. Studies show they receive less medication, fewer tests, and are often not believed, especially in emergency settings. The hospital's legal counsel spoke up, tone cautious. We don't dispute these concerns, but perhaps this discussion is better suited for a different venue. Whitmore cut him off coldly. This isn't about liability, though we'll get to that. It's about a pattern that killed a young mother and nearly buried her son. He paused. The room held its breath. My team has analyzed treatment disparities at this hospital. Wait times, triage decisions, pain management, all of it. The numbers show clear racial bias. He finished his presentation with a slide that shocked the room into silence. Then Walter stepped forward from the back, speaking for the first time. I've worked here 23 years, the janitor said, and I've seen it all. Who gets treated quick? Who gets questioned? Who's believed and who isn't? Nothing Mr. Whitmore said today surprises any of the black staff. We see it. We live it. The silence grew heavier, till Dr. Harrison finally spoke, clearly unsettled. If such disparities exist, I assure you they were never intentional. Westbrook General takes pride in intent, doesn't matter to the dead, Whitmore said flatly. Outcomes do. And your outcomes failed, Letitia Robinson. He leaned forward, his voice steel. To begin righting that wrong, I'm establishing a $10 million fund to address healthcare inequities at this hospital. Independent audits, mandatory staff retraining, community oversight. A stunned silence followed. Then the door opened. Bradley Whitmore walked in, perfectly composed. Apologies for the delay, he said smoothly. I was finalizing paperwork for my father's neuropsychiatric evaluation. His doctors raised concerns about recent impulsivity, understandable given the coma. He delivered the line like a polished actor, confident it would end the meeting, but James was ready. The evaluation was completed yesterday, he replied calmly. Dr. Anand supervised. No cognitive deficits found. My capacity is intact. He nodded to his attorney, who'd passed out documentation. And while you were staging this little coup, Whitmore added, my legal team reviewed the Foundation's records under your leadership. The pattern was alarming. Bradley's polished facade flickered. Every decision was made by the board according to policy. You mean the board you rebuilt by pressuring dissenters to resign? James shot back. All 4 members who supported diversity initiatives disappeared under your leadership. The dossier told the rest. Funding for black communities slashed. Educational grants diverted. Health programs cut. Arts endowments funneled to elite institutions Bradley frequented. Worst of all, Whitmore revealed the embezzlement consulting fees paid to shell companies tied to Bradley, and it wasn't just the Foundation, James said, his tone heavy with regret. You dismantled our minority recruitment program, buried the affordable housing project. You gutted every mission-driven initiative we built. Bradley dropped the mask completely. Those programs were bleeding money. I did what was necessary. While you were lying in a bed, I preserved your empire. James stared at his son, really seeing him. My legacy isn't an empire, he said quietly. It's what we do with it. Permission to address the court. Though Bradley had been formally removed from all roles within Whitmore's companies and Foundation, he had forced his way into the adoption case as an interested party, claiming concern over his father's mental fitness and the potential implications for family inheritance. My client is gravely concerned about his father's cognitive stability following a prolonged medical trauma, his attorney said smoothly. This abrupt decision to adopt a child, particularly one with no previous connection to the family and from such a vastly different backgrounds, suggests an emotional impulse rather than sound judgment. It was a polished opposition strategy. Bradley never directly mentioned race, but leaned heavily on language of difference and background, cues that subtly aligned with the judge's apparent predispositions. The tactic had successfully delayed the process for months, prompting further evaluations and extending temporary guardianship, leaving Marcus's future uncertain. Today, however, was designated as the final hearing. Character witnesses had been assembled to support Whitmore's petition. Walter took the stand first, recounting the series of hospital visits and the strange yet unmistakable connection that had formed between the boy and the man in the coma. I've never seen anything like it, the janitor concluded plainly. That boy saved Mr. Whitmore's life just by being there, reading to him, talking to him, caring when no one else did. And now Mr. Whitmore's saving his. Next came Dr. Chin, who presented clinical data to back the seemingly inexplicable link. Clear spikes in neurological activity on the same nights Marcus had visited. Scientifically, their connection defies conventional understanding, she explained, but the results are measurable and real. Then Marcus himself took the stand. For a 10-year-old in a formal courtroom, his composure was extraordinary. Mr. Whitmore helps me with homework. He takes me to the Science Museum every Saturday, he said in response to questions about their relationship. He listens to me. Really listens. And he never gets mad when I ask too many questions. When Judge Harmon pressed him about his cultural ties, Marcus answered with quiet confidence. My mom always said character matters more than color, he said. Mr. Whitmore has good character. He helps people live in when nobody's looking. The room fell into silence. The boy's statement carried more weight than hours of expert testimony. Even Bradley's lawyer looked momentarily stunned as the hearing moved toward conclusion. Whitmore requested to speak directly to the court. Leaning on his cane, he rose slowly, visibly summoning the strength for what he was about to say. 6 months ago, I woke up from a place I thought I'd never return from, and I did so because a child, a complete stranger, saw worth in me when I couldn't even move, when I was nothing more than a coma case on a chart. He paused, voice trembling slightly. Marcus came to me every night, he read. He talked. He treated me like a person. not an experiment. He did this in spite of having every reason not to trust a system that had failed him time and again. He steadied himself, locking eyes with the judge, while I was unconscious. My own son diverted foundation funds away from the very communities Marcus came from. My companies had hiring practices I was unaware of but responsible for that contributed to inequality. Marcus's mother might still be alive if she'd been hired. That's on me, and I won't hide from that truth. A shift passed through the courtroom as Whitmore named what others avoided: complicity in a broken system. This isn't about charity or guilt, he said. It's about the bond we built across differences, yes, but forged in something real. Family isn't about looking alike or coming from the same place. It's about showing up. It's about choosing one another. As he sat down, his attorney, Ms. Rodriguez, stood. Your Honor, she said, distributing documents, we've waited until now to present this final piece of evidence. The pages revealed an employment application Letitia Robinson had submitted to Whitmore Technologies 6 years earlier, along with a rejection letter. The reason, her address in Eastern Heights, automatically flagged by an HR algorithm. Letitia was fully qualified for the position, Rodriguez explained. Employment would have provided the health care she needed. Her condition may have been treatable. This rejection based on discriminatory screening played a role in the events that led to Marcus becoming homeless. The courtroom fell silent. Even Bradley, until now unshaken, seemed momentarily at a loss. After a brief recess, Judge Harmon returned. Her demeanor subtly changed. Though still formal, the combative tone had softened. This court has reviewed all evidence regarding the proposed adoption of Marcus Robinson by James Whitmore, she said. The circumstances are indeed unusual and warrant unique consideration. She looked directly at Marcus. Young man, my duty is to protect your best interests. And after reviewing all testimony and reports, this court finds that despite notable differences in background, the strength of your bond with Mr. Whitmore is compelling and inarguable. Her next words brought tears to more than one pair of eyes. The adoption petition is granted, subject to the standard 6-month supervisory period and quarterly review by Family Services. Bradley leaped from his seat, beginning to object, but Judge Harmon raised a hand sharply. The court has ruled. Mr. Whitmore, if you wish to appeal, do so through the appropriate channels. Outside, in the warm light of spring, a new family descended the courthouse steps. Marcus Robinson Whitmore, flanked by his new father and Walter. No cameras, no reporters, no fanfares, just quiet celebration, and a boy finally, officially home. Dr. Chin followed them down the courthouse steps, her expression radiating quiet satisfaction. Reporters shouted questions about their next steps, but most went unanswered as the trio made their way toward the waiting car. Only when asked specifically about the Foundation's future initiatives did Whitmore pause, his hand resting firmly on Marcus' shoulder. We're launching the Letitia Robinson Memorial Fund, he said, focused on eliminating healthcare disparities in underserved communities. He glanced at Marcus with unmistakable pride. Marcus will help shape its mission once he finishes his education, which, if his current interests continue, looks like it may include medical school. The pride in his voice was unmistakable as he looked down at the boy who had reached him across seemingly unbridgeable divides of class, race, and even consciousness. 6 months later, Marcus stood at the gates of Westbrook Academy, the prestigious private school that had once seemed like a fantasy. He had earned admission through exceptional test scores, but now stood stiffly in his uniform, feeling the weight of being one of the only black students at a predominantly white institution. Sensing the nerves beneath his formal posture, Whitmore adjusted Marcus' tie with a steady hand. Remember what you told the judge? He said gently. That character matters more than color. That works both ways. Some people will only see what sets you apart, but others will recognize what makes you exceptional. Their journey had already reshaped both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined that night in the hospital. Whitmore had found purpose, far beyond profit, redirecting his fortune and influence toward confronting the systemic injustices he now understood because he had lived their consequences. Marcus had found stability, safety, and family in a world where he'd expected only struggle and solitude. His innate brilliance, once invisible to institutions, was finally being recognized and nurtured, but both knew the greater transformation extended. Beyond them, it echoed in the Foundation's revised priorities, in new hospital protocols that treated every patient with dignity, regardless of background. In Walter's long overdue promotion to facilities manager, with the power to implement improvements he'd proposed for years. "You ready?" Whitmore asked, as the school bell rang in the distance. Marcus squared his shoulders, eyes steady with quiet determination. "Ready?" Together, they walked through the school's front doors, forever changed by the unlikely bond that had brought them here. A homeless boy, a comatose millionaire. Two lives that intersected by chance and changed each other, and those around them, in extraordinary ways. Have you ever experienced an unexpected connection that transformed your life? Share your story in the comments below. Marcus and James's story reminds us that the most profound human bonds can form across the deepest divides. If their journey touched you, please like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen even in a fractured world. This story shines a light on the invisible barriers of racial discrimination embedded in our institutions' healthcare, education, the legal system, and corporate policy. Through Marcus and Whitmore's intertwined lives, we witness how bias is not always overt, but exists in subtle dismissals, unfair rejections, and assumptions that quietly destroy lives. It reveals a hard truth. Genuine healing begins with accountability. Whitmore's acknowledgement that his own company's hiring practices contributed to Letitia's death wasn't a public gesture, was a personal reckoning, a necessary first step in dismantling the very systems he had once benefited from. This story shows that confronting injustice demands more than generous donations. It requires bold, systemic change. And yet, the most powerful message of all is the transformative power of authentic human connection. Marcus didn't see a wealthy, white man in a hospital bed. He saw a person in need, and Whitmore, in turn, saw not a charity case, but a child of immeasurable worth. Their story urges us to examine our own assumptions and believe in the possibility of change, because sometimes the most meaningful bonds emerge from the most unlikely places, and sometimes those bonds spark ripples that reach far beyond redemption toward justice. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where human connection broke through racial or social barriers? Share your reflections in the comments. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful accounts of resilience and unity. Tap the notification bell so you won't miss what comes next, and if you know someone who doubts that goodness can still thrive in a divided world, send them this story, because transformation is possible, and sometimes it begins with a voice in the dark.